Join Carol Davies on Global Voice Radio, the host of Only the Best for You. Be a change maker and unlock the secret to your best life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show Only the Best for You here on Global Voice Radio. My name is Carol Davies of the Passion Motivator Coaching Company, and I'm very pleased to share with you the best information and speakers about how you can be a change maker to make the world and yourself the best you can be. Today, I'm very honored to be interviewing the well-known Canadian coach, Lisa Ann Palmer of Cattelan Palmer Consulting. She's based in Ottawa, Canada, and has been in the coaching business for quite a long time. She has a business where she is able to meet with different people. She has corporate clients, and it's really, really exciting. So, as I say, I'm very, very pleased and excited to be talking with her. And I would like to ask Lisa to introduce herself to you and just tell you a little bit about her background and how she got where she is today.
Thank you, Carol, for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be on your show. So I began working in workplaces as an HR consultant way back in the early 1990s. And so I have over 25 years experience working in HR, organizational development, and certainly focused in the last few years since starting my business in 2011, becoming a leadership coach, as well as career advancement coach. I also do speaking and training. And this really lines up well with my passions about leadership, which we're going to be discussing in a few moments. So it's been an exciting journey. I've worked both in the private sector, in the public sector in Canada, and I've also done a lot of work with the nonprofits. So I've gotten a 360 view of what workplaces are like. I've also had the honor of working with people at all levels, from entry level all the way to CEO and president. So I'm happy to be here and to be able to share today about some of the work that I do.
Well, I think that sounds really exciting, and especially being in Canada's capital, you must be in the hub of all the, politics and exciting national events there. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that must really keep you with some interesting clients.
Yes, absolutely. Keeps me on my toes, that's for sure.
I was wondering if you could tell us about some of your heart-centered coaching techniques. For example, we found out that we both have the Passion Test training in common. Can you tell us about the Passion Test and why you trained in it and how you use it in your coaching and consulting practice?
Absolutely, Carol. And that was a really great surprise to find that out. So that we both share the Passion Test training. So the Passion Test is basically, one of the top tools to be able to help people get clear on what's important to them in life. And we call that, the top 5 passions in life. And I came about it through a person that I know, and she told me that she was a Passion Test facilitator. Actually, it was really funny the way it happened, because I was doing career coaching for people who had lost their jobs in the government back in 2012. And we had met for lunch across the country. It was with my sister. She was an old childhood friend from my sister's past. And one of the things I said was, I was loving the coaching, and I was just feeling like I was missing one tool. And she said, well, what's that? I said, I need a tool to help people discover their passions or identify their passions. And she said to me, well, what a coincidence. Her name's Lauren. Lauren said, I am a certified Passion Test Facilitator. And so that was like lightning for me. So that I said, wow, tell me more. And about a year later, I became certified. It was in Vancouver. And the creators of Passion Test, Janet Bray Atwood and Chris Atwood, I think did a phenomenal job in creating this tool, because I find when I use it in my coaching, because I do use it as a basis for both my career coaching and the leadership coaching, is that clients will have insights that are really important for them, that help them make more aligned career and life decisions in general, and also to discover whether or not leadership in a formal way is for them. So that's why I tend to start with a passion test when people are open to going through that, to get them really clear on their top 5, and that way, even if leadership is not for them, at least they could be leaders in their own life, which I think is important. I believe everybody needs to be a leader in their own life, and to drive that, I call it the career bus, to get behind the driver's seat of the career bus. So that's how I came, I started using the passion test. Other tools I developed myself, or I've used from other coaches that I've had, and usually it's about a lot of self-reflection. I find that people get into formal leadership roles sometimes without thinking about the responsibilities, or even if it's for them, if it's a calling, or if it's just something that they're getting into because they think it's the natural next step in their career for advancement. So I put a lot of focus and emphasis on that, and help people get those important insights, so that if leadership is for them, then I help them become better equipped to make that transition between being, for example, a high performer to becoming a great people leader.
Well, I think that is extremely informative, and it definitely shows that you have a unique approach to coaching, in that you're putting what they would call techniques that are not necessarily just very cut and dried, but aligned with emotional factors and personal choices. I think that's very, very important for people to know, because sometimes people are not sure if they want to go into coaching, and it could be, someone in a leadership role, a manager or something, or just, somebody starting out. And to know that it's important to know about yourself, I think, as you said, is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing I wanted to know was, what type of clients do you tend to work with? Is it small entrepreneurs, or is it larger corporate clients?
Right now, I tend to work a lot more with corporate clients. I have a great deal of clients who are in the private sector and public sector as well. However, I'm open to working with anyone who isn't basically responsible for leading people towards a common objective. So yes, entrepreneurs who are growing their companies. For instance, I'm becoming more and more involved with startups, because, one moment you're maybe a group of 3 specialists or developers, and then next thing you know, you start to grow and you've got 20 people, then 30 people and 50 people, and then people who were maybe really great at their jobs when they're coding programs or whatnot are now having to lead people. That's not an easy transition to make. And it requires actually a certain degree of transformation, personal transformation, to be able to do that effectively. So in a nutshell, I right now I'm focusing on new and aspiring leaders. So in other words, people who are maybe 1 or 2 levels below manager, all the way to directors who've been in the job for less than 5 years. So that's really my niche, and who I want to help. I find that a lot of people who are really great at their job, who are high performers, tend to be the ones who are offered promotions or tend to compete for promotions. And maybe sometimes they do it without enough information or enough self-reflection about the huge responsibility that it entails, as well as what's the personal investment that's required in that process.
I agree very much with you about you get very talented people who start rising in a company or an organization, and then they're promoted into manager or leadership, and they then find out they get overwhelmed because they're really talented, but sometimes being a leader is something you can be a natural leader, but do you think that people need to have a certain degree of education in leadership in order to succeed in that?
Absolutely. I feel that leadership is basically a life skill. And there's not enough being discussed in schools to prepare people for leadership, even at the university level. A lot of the education is around what I like to call more management, which is important too, don't get me wrong. I think that's very important. But I find that there's a huge gap when it comes to what's really important about leadership. What's fundamental is the ability to connect at the human level. That human connection is key to leadership. And that's why one of the key concepts of one of the books that's coming up that I'm currently writing is that what sets great leaders apart are the 3 C's of connection, which is essentially this: compassion, courage, and competence as a leader.
I think that is something that you've mentioned, the 3 C's, actually is something quite easy to remember, because they all start with a C, and yet they're all important in their own right. So it's very interesting that you're putting that into your new book. And this is a very exciting project that Lisa has going now. She's been writing her new book, and it's called Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership. And she was telling me she's very close to finishing the book, probably by the end of this year. And I would really like her to tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write the book, who is it aimed at, and what would you say are some of the major ideas in the book?
Sure, absolutely. I would love to. So what prompted me to write the book is that as I was going along in my work, I was noticing that there was a gap in leadership, in the connection piece that I was talking about. And one of my mentors, Joel Roberts, he's basically a communications genius. He teaches that, write the book that you wish you would have had. So back in I'm 47 now, but back when I was 34, I got this acting assignment as a director in human resources. And I went overnight from having basically 3 people reporting to me to having 22 people reporting to me. And without much support, without a lot of, without a heads up, it was basically overnight. And then all of a sudden, I was left to my own devices. And I knew about leadership. I had taken some of the courses and I've practiced them, and I led smaller teams and as well as cross-functional teams. But nothing had prepared me for quite this role. And I wish I would have had a book like the one I'm writing way back then, because it's a book that speaks to new and aspiring leaders. It's a book which is a guide. And I call it The Truth About Leadership, not because I think I know the absolute truth, but I've interviewed a lot of wonderful leaders, thought leaders actually, including Steve Farber, who's the author of I can't think of the name right now, but and what I find is that a lot of what's out there already is about the process, the management piece, the performance management, things that are more left-brained, if you will. My perspective is that true leadership is from the heart, whereas the management piece is from the mind. They're both important and they need to be kept in balance. But there's certainly a gap in the market when it comes to, leading from the heart. So that's what I wanted to capture in this book. I wanted to speak directly to new and aspiring leaders and tell them the truth about the types of challenges that they're going to face. Nobody said it was going to be easy, right? But certainly when management is trying to basically entice high performers into leadership roles, you know, they kind of, you know, speak to it at the surface. So this is it goes a bit deeper. It talks about shifting your mindset. It talks about building trust and fostering inclusion, establishing and managing relationships, not only with your employees, but also with your colleagues, and learning how to manage upwards. Those are all key relationships, in addition, of course, to working with clients and stakeholders. It has to do with self-caring. I find that's one of the biggest challenges for leaders that I work with, is that, you know, they're busy trying to, you know, meet tight deadlines, trying to rally the troops around that, dealing with employee issues and emotions and all that stuff. And they forget to take care of themselves and learning how to set healthy boundaries. Those are the kinds of topics that I talk about in my book, you know. And also one of my favorites is leaping out of your comfort zone. So certainly as a leader, you know, you can't stay in your comfort zone. And that's one of the things I love about what Steve Farber teaches, is that he calls it extreme leadership, is that if ever, you know, you're in a leadership role and you don't feel afraid or scared, it means you're not stretching enough. You got to feel fear every day, face it, and then, you know, push through. So those are the kinds of topics that I'm addressing in this book, because I think it's important to get to that level to help new and aspiring leaders prepare for these really important roles. And I keep saying it's important. Yes, it's important to be productive and achieve results and all that. Of course, that's what the organization wants. But at the same time, we need to look at the human factor. You know, leading people is a big responsibility. The impact that you have on the lives of the people that are part of your team is really great. It's important to realize that when you say something, or even when you forget to say hello in the morning, when you perhaps, you know, don't get involved in the lives of your employees in a meaningful way, or help them see how they fit into the vision of the organization, or what their contribution, how important it is, then, you know, it has a very negative impact on people. And although my focus is working with leaders, I do also work with people who are struggling in organizations as a result of, you know, bad leadership, quote unquote, or the way they've been treated by the people that are really in charge of their workplace.
I really believe that the topics that you've outlined to us now prove to be a little bit different look at leadership. And it sounds extremely exciting, I think. I'm looking forward to reading it when the book comes out. So would you say that leadership in the 21st century is different than what we had in the 20th century?
I hope so. That's my hope. I hope that, you know, the future of leadership is, as I mentioned earlier, that it's going to be viewed as a life skill, and that it would be talked about and taught early on in people's lives. And that the conversation, yes, involve management, but goes beyond that to the truth about leadership, which is leadership is about love and human connection. And I think those are the things that are really important. I hear often, it's almost like a trend, right? So somebody becomes a new leader and they're basically told, go forth and inspire and engage. Well, rather than making those into buzzwords, what does it really mean to inspire? What does it mean to engage someone? So I came up with this model, and again, it's not just based on my own experience, although it has a lot to do with what I've seen and observed in the workplace. It also has to do with some of the wonderful leaders that I've interviewed for the book. And I call it the 8 P's of ignition. And the 8 P's of ignition to ignite engagement, basically, and passion at work. So the 8 P's of ignition are profundity, So that's a new one. I was trying to say, because some of the other concepts are things that you've heard of. I brought them together, but things like passion, purpose, perseverance, etc. But the first one is Profundity, and that's really about helping new and aspiring leaders, or even people who are considering or dabbling to figure out if it's for them, to dig deep, to do some self-reflection, figure out, I like to ask the question, to lead or not to lead? That's fundamentally the question, right? Although we can all be self-leaders, not necessarily everyone wants to be a formal leader. So there's a difference between formal and informal leadership. And that's a decision, right? So as a new leader, I'm going to ask myself, well, first of all, I want to find out all I can what leadership is about. So I might read about it. I might get a mentor. I might, ask people what it's about. But then I need to ask myself as well, once I get that information, whether or not it's for me. And what's happening oftentimes in the workplace, when I see that there's conflict or miscommunication or people suffering in the workplace, it often has to do with people who take on the roles of leader for the wrong reasons, which to me are, just for an increase in pay, maybe the corner office, to get more power, or for the title. If those are the only reasons why someone is taking on that role, well, they need to think twice. And I help people think twice about that. Now, if on the flip side, you're taking it because you want to rally people to, achieve something that's greater than all of you put together, to follow their passions, to make a difference in their organization, to make a difference in the community and even in the world. Those are the types of things which I call the calling for leadership. Those are the types of things that when people get those feelings or desires, that, go for it. Learn more about what it's like to be a leader, learn the skills, learn the principles. So Profundity is that first principle, which is, to encourage the people to do that self-reflection, that soul searching, and figure out whether or not formal leadership is for them. The second piece is passion. So both you and I know as Passion Test Facilitators that it's extremely important to not only tap into your passions, but also help those who are part of your team to tap into theirs. And then make that connection between all your passions and the mandate of the organization or the mission of the organization, so that they can see that there's a link and that there's meaning to their work. And I think that's where, if you're asking what's the difference between leadership in the past and leadership in the future, I think more and more there's emphasis being put on how important the meaning of work is in people's lives. You can't separate work from your life. They're part of the same thing. So it's important to be passionate about your work, to love your work, even if we have ups and downs, of course, but making those important decisions that will help you basically live your purpose, which is the third principle. And the purpose is all about the why, right? Your own why as a leader, helping people discover why they're doing the work, how it fits into the larger picture. And I love the book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. So that's something I recommend often to some of my clients, is to get really clear and conscious and aware of why we do the things we do. We spend, at least 7 and 8 hours a day at work. So being sure that those hours matter and that line up with our purpose, I think is really key. So that's the third piece, is purpose. The fourth piece is perseverance, right? And perseverance, and there's been a lot of studies done about grit and the importance of grit in helping us succeed. So perseverance is especially key when you are a leader, because it's a bumpy road. It's not easy. it's worth it. It's rewarding if it's your desire, and you dedicate your career to that role. But perseverance is certainly key, and it leads to resilience, and also helping those who are part of your team to become resilient as well. So, for example, here in Ottawa, we've been going through a lot of organizational transitions in the federal government since 2011, 2012, and what I've noticed is those are my clients who have that perseverance and that resilience, together with compassion, really have helped their teams move through those difficult periods. So they were able to bounce back. So I think perseverance is really key. The fifth principle is professionalism. And I view professionalism as wider than just, professional behavior, for instance. But so of course it includes the technical competencies and abilities. But in that, I also include civility, respect, treating others in an inclusive fashion, helping people belong. That's one of the key things. Even if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for instance, right in the middle there is belongingness. And as a leader, you need to help people feel like they belong in an organization. I've led a lot of focus groups to research engagements within organizations. And that's one thing that comes up often is people feel disengaged when they feel like they don't belong, like they feel isolated. And so as a leader, you really need to focus and figure out how to include everyone, no matter what background they have, or, different abilities, different cultural backgrounds, different ways of thinking even, whether or not your employees are introverts or extroverts, learning how to bring people together and maximize and build on all the different wonderful pieces that they bring. So as a leader, I think that's really key, is that professionalism, that civility, and also expecting it from your employees. You need to really draw the line on certain behaviors and make sure you're clear and are able to communicate that clearly. So that's a really, a deeper part of the professionalism that's required as a leader in the 21st century, in addition to all the other wonderful things that we normally hear about. The sixth piece is one of my favorites, and I have to give credit to my coach. When I got my coaching certification, her name is Pauline Fleming, and she used to emphasize this quite a bit, is play. So the sixth principle is play. And I have a saying I like to use, and I say, fun is fuel. So fun creates energy. It brings people together. It brings the walls down. It leads to a more inclusive workplace, more fun. And actually, this is where I want to share a quote. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Sir Richard Branson and shaking his hand this summer. And I was at a conference. He's one of my leadership heroes, if you will. And I was able to ask a question. It was a conference for women entrepreneurs. And I asked the question, what would you advise us, meaning the women in the audience, what would you advise us as we grow our companies and we want to keep our people engaged and passionate? What would be your best piece of advice? And he said these things. He said, first, you need to listen, 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 listen. He literally said it 5 times. And that's so important, because when you listen and are present with your employees, they can feel that you really care about them, that they matter, not only to the company, but they matter to you as an individual. So listening, hearing them, seeing what's important to them, whether, building that trust so they can share your fears with you and you can help them work through it. And also listen to what their aspirations are, their desires, their passions, and that will really help you as a leader. So I definitely agree with Sir Richard Branson on that one. So listen, listen, listen. And that's been echoed by a lot of thought leaders like Patrick Lencioni, as well as Steve Farber, I mentioned earlier, Deepak Chopra. They emphasize it's important to listen to your people. The second thing he said was to love people in general and look for the best in them. So for instance, if as a leader, you have a group of people, you want to make sure that you have that connection, that, loving them because they're human and because they're part of your team and they're giving their all to trying to achieve really important goals. So looking for that humanity and really appreciating people, I think is key to being a great leader. And the third thing he said was to help people love their jobs and have fun every day. So that's really, huge, because Richard Branson is extremely successful, and nowhere in his response did he say, you got to look at your HR dashboard and you need to do employee engagement surveys and do performance management. He didn't say any of that, right? Which is usually some of the pushback I get from maybe some of the more traditional leadership types. So I was really, really happy to hear that. And that's why, the sixth principle is about play. How can you help people have fun at work and want to come in every day? And when they're not having fun, figure out why. So that's the sixth principle. The seventh principle is philanthropy. So basically wanting to do good for other human beings, for the planet, for other living beings. Often as consultants or coaches, we might get called in to do team building activities, and it could be simulation exercises or whatnot. I always try to encourage employers to find ways to get people gathered around an important cause that can make a difference. People feel good when they do something good for others, when they contribute to a cause. So using philanthropy as a way to engage your employees is certainly a very effective means. People get passionate about it. They want to make a difference. They want to help. And you as a leader can help facilitate that for them. So I think philanthropy is important. And the feelings that people tap into when they're in that frame of mind is really something that can help improve the workplace, because they've tapped into that, as working towards a common cause, but then those feelings kind of linger on as people relate to one another, and therefore that improves your workplace. And the eighth one is prosperity. So prosperity goes beyond just, of course, salaries are important, right? People have to put food on their table and invest in their future and all that. So that's really central to prosperity. There's also the whole entire piece about recognition, sharing the prosperity with your employees, making sure that, whatever your organization earns, that's shared, that the employees can share in that wealth. And then they can really feel part of the team, because they're making a big contribution, and at the same time, they're getting recognized and rewarded for it. So those are the 8 P's of ignition, which might be a little bit different than what you would normally learn in university, for sure.
Well, Lisa, it sounds like the 8 principles that you mentioned to us, let's just call them the 8 P's for short, are really based on what you've lived and observed in, interacting with leaders, training them, seeing what's important for them. And I think when your new book comes out, this is going to present some very new and fresh material that people are going to be, I think, quite excited about, because listening, to what you mentioned about, the 8 P's and that, and a couple I found very, not surprising, but I wouldn't have thought about, really was the play. Now that to me, I think back to different jobs that I've had, and there's certainly were not a lot of ones where it was devoted to having a lot of fun. You might go out for lunch once in a while or whatever, but you look at other big corporations like Google or some of the ones even in Silicon Valley, and they put a lot of emphasis on play. I've read some stories about things like that, and I thought, gee, that's really a sort of funny thing to do, but it does get your employee energy up and the engagement. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing. I'm going to look, to read more about when the book comes out. And I like the one too about the philanthropy, the thing about giving back. It's not just you as a person, but if you're in a leadership role, like you said, you have a responsibility to make sure the people that you're leading are having a good experience in their job, and also making it possible for them, to enjoy and just be, the best people they can be as well. So I really do think some of these principles you're talking about are definitely more part of what I would call the 21st century model of leadership, because it's much, much different to what we saw back, let's say the 20th century, even late 19th century, where it was much more, cut and dried and theoretical, whatever. Now, I think we're bringing people and, the heart into it, because as you said, the main title of your book is Light a Fire in Their Hearts. So because you've put that word heart in there, this is obviously central. And the word fire, we all have associations with that. It's renewal, it's energy, it's all sorts of things. So it's a really wonderful title for the book, I think. And I wish it was available right now for us to read. I know that you're still, getting it, sort of finished up and whatever, but we're definitely going to be looking forward to that. So what do you think you'd like to give as a few tips to people who would be interested to be leaders? What should they think about doing?
So thank you for asking. Definitely do the soul searching first. And at the same time, connect with other people who you admire, who have made a difference in your life, or who you observed being great leaders, and ask them what their journey has been. I think sharing stories is really important, and it gives those insights that you don't necessarily learn in a course at school. So gain clarity, figure out, is it something that you're passionate about? And, figure out the reason why you're doing it. So that's number one. Number two is surround yourself with passionate people who are, I would say, heart-centered, who care about others. And listen, just like Richard Branson said, listen. Be a great observer of your surroundings. So that's one of the things that I suggest to people when they first, when they meet with me and they're considering leadership or whatnot, or in any capacity for that matter, is I have them observe their surroundings, take notes, figure out who in the company has influence, and model the ones that have a positive impact. Also notice the ones who have or are displaying negative behaviors, because those are the kinds of things you don't want to do, right? And of course, the third piece is really understand that leadership is a way of being. And it's also a skill that you can learn. If you have a desire to become a leader, learn the skill, just like you would learn, how to do accounting, or learn how to, program, an app, take the same amount of time and invest the same amount of effort in learning how to become a great leader, because it is a skill and it's important. So if you want to make that transition or transformation, even from being really great at the technical work that you're doing to becoming a really great people leader, you need to put in the effort. You need to put in the time, and you need to surround yourself with people who are very good examples.
Well, I think what you just said is very inspiring for those, who are considering going into leadership, or maybe, in a leadership role themselves, and maybe like to make a little bit of a change or a difference. And I'd really like to thank you for being with us today, Lisa, and, sharing all those very profound and heart-centered ideas about leadership. And I'd like to just remind the people that we have about Lisa's, forthcoming book, which is Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership, because I think I predict this is going to be a very, very important book for people to read in the future, because of all the wonderful advice and just inspiration that Lisa shared with us today. So tell us, Lisa, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like more information or to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can visit my website, and in there they can share their information. It's at www.lisaannapalmer.com. So I'll spell that out: www.lisaannapalmer.com.
Great. That's wonderful.
You can also visit my Facebook page, and they could find that at Lisa Anna Palmer, Cattelan Palmer Consulting.
And how do you spell Cattelan?
Cattelan is Cattelan.
Great. Well, again, thank you so very much. And thank you everyone for listening today. I'll be bringing you another exciting program next week on Only the Best for You here on Global Voice Radio. So this is Carol Davies, and you can find me at www.thepassionmotivator.com or by email at coachcaroldavies@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone, and talk to you again next week. Bye now.
Thank you.
Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern for Only the Best for You with Carol Davies on Global Voice Radio.